The first time anyone noticed the boy, it wasn't because he spoke, smiled, or asked for help. It was because he stood perfectly still on a cracked sidewalk, clutching a battered old guitar with strings so worn they looked like they might snap if the wind blew too hard, his eyes fixed on nothing and everything at once, as if the world had already taught him too many lessons for someone so young, and people passed him without a second glance until a single haunting chord floated into the evening air, soft and unsure at first, then steadier, carrying a pain so raw that it made strangers slow their steps, because this wasn't just music, it was a confession, and the boy, his name was Daniel, though few ever bothered to ask, had learned early that sound was safer than words, that melodies didn't interrupt, didn't argue back, didn't leave when things got hard, because Daniel's childhood had been shattered long before he could understand what broken even meant, starting in a narrow apartment where walls were thin, voices were loud, and kindness was rare, where his father's anger arrived before dinner and his mother's silence lingered long after. And by the time Daniel was 7, he knew how to pack his fear into small spaces, how to disappear into corners, how to listen for footsteps that meant trouble. But he also remembered one good thing: his mother humming softly while washing dishes late at night, tired but gentle, a tune she never finished because life always interrupted, and that unfinished song lived inside Daniel like a promise he didn't yet know how to keep. When his parents finally disappeared from his life, one into addiction, the other into illness that took her quietly while Daniel slept, he moved through foster homes like a shadow, carrying his clothes in plastic bags and his heart in silence, learning that adults often meant well but rarely stayed, that kindness could be temporary, and that expectations were dangerous, so he learned not to hope too loudly, not to dream too clearly, until one winter, at 12 years old, he found an old guitar in the corner of a donation center, missing a tuning peg and covered in dust, and when he strummed it, the sound was ugly and uneven, but something in his chest loosened, as if the instrument had been waiting for him too, and from that day on, Daniel poured everything he couldn't say into those strings: loneliness, anger, grief, and small sparks of hope he pretended not to feel. And music became his shelter, his language, his way of surviving days that felt endless. Years passed, and Daniel grew into a quiet teenager who drifted between part-time jobs and cheap rooms, never staying long enough to be missed, until one evening in a small American town, one of those places with flickering streetlights and diners that smelled like coffee and regret, he stood outside a subway entrance, cold seeping through his jacket, and began to play a song he'd been practicing for months, his own stripped-down version of Hotel California, not flashy, not loud, but slow and aching, as if the song itself had lived a hard life. And at first, people walked past, absorbed in phones and schedules, but then something shifted, because Daniel didn't play it like a cover, he played it like a memory, each lyric softened, each note stretched, his voice barely above a whisper yet heavy with truth, and one by one, people stopped, not because they recognized the song, but because they recognized the feeling, that strange mix of longing and loss, of wanting to belong somewhere but never quite finding the door. A businessman loosened his tie and forgot his meeting, a college student wiped away tears she didn't expect, an older man sat on a bench, staring at the ground as if remembering someone he once was, and Daniel, lost in the music, didn't notice them at first, didn't notice the small crowd forming, didn't notice the woman in a worn coat who stood near the back, hands clasped tightly, eyes shining, because she wasn't just hearing a song. She was hearing her own past echo back to her. Her name was Grace, and she had spent her life working with at-risk youth, believing fiercely that no child was beyond saving, though the world often tried to convince her otherwise. And as she listened to Daniel, she realized this wasn't a boy performing for attention. This was a soul releasing years of silence, and when the song ended, the street fell into a hush so deep it felt sacred, followed by applause that wasn't loud but sincere, the kind that comes from gratitude rather than excitement. And Daniel looked up, startled, as if waking from a dream, unsure what he had done to deserve this moment, unsure whether it would vanish if he acknowledged it. Coins and small bills filled his guitar case, but more importantly, eyes met his with respect, not pity, and Grace stepped forward, offering him a cup of hot coffee and a simple question that no one had asked him in a long time. "Are you okay?" And that question, so small, so human, hit Daniel harder than any applause, because for the first time, Someone wasn't asking him to perform, to explain, or to disappear, they were asking him to exist, and he nodded, though tears burned behind his eyes, and Grace didn't push, didn't pry, just stayed, listening as he spoke haltingly about music, about how songs made things hurt less, about how he never planned to sing for anyone, it just happened, and she listened the way people rarely do anymore, fully, without distraction, and before she left, she handed him a card, inviting him to a small community music night at a local center. No promises, no pressure, just an open door. Daniel almost didn't go, because open doors had scared him before, but something about that night, the warmth of strangers, the way his pain had briefly turned into something shared, pushed him forward, and when he finally stepped onto that small stage days later, under soft lights and in front of folding chairs filled with ordinary people, he felt his hands shake, but he sang anyway, and when he finished, the room rose to its feet, not because he was perfect, but because he was real, and in that moment, Daniel realized something unexpected and powerful, that his broken childhood hadn't destroyed him, it had shaped a voice that could reach places untouched by polished talent, that his scars weren't weaknesses but pathways, and over time, with Grace's quiet support and the encouragement of people who believed without demanding, Daniel began to play more, to write his own songs, to mentor younger kids who reminded him of himself, offering them the same patience he had once needed, turning his survival into service, his pain into purpose, and years later, when Daniel stood on a larger stage, singing Hotel California once more, this time to thousands, he didn't change the song, didn't dress it up, because it still carried his story, but now, layered beneath the sadness, there was hope, a sense of release, and as the final note faded, the crowd stood, not just applauding a performance, but honoring a journey, because they weren't just hearing music, they were witnessing what happens when kindness interrupts a broken path, when one act of compassion opens a door, when a child who learned to survive learns instead to belong, and Daniel smiled then, not wide, not dramatic, but genuine, because he finally understood that while he could never erase his past, he could transform it, and that sometimes, the most beautiful songs are born from the quiet decision to keep going, to keep giving, and to let humanity, in all its imperfect kindness, carry you home.